First, we're going to talk about the consumer demand curve. It's the graph of P equals D of X. It represents the price per unit, that's P, that's the solution, that a customer is willing to pay for X units of a product. So what you're going to put into it for X is going to be how many units you're going to buy, how many pencils you're going to buy, how many computers you're going to buy, and the result, P, is what you're willing to pay per unit to get that many units of the product. Usually the graph is decreasing because we tend to expect to pay less when we buy things in bulk. Like think about your warehouse stores like Sam's Club or Costco's or BJ's. When you buy items in bulk, you expect that you're going to pay less per unit for them. So this is going to be a decreasing curve. Now we also have the producer supply curve, and that's the graph of P equals S of X. Again, P is going to represent the price per unit. X is going to be the number of units sold. This time it's the price that the producer is willing to accept for selling X units. Usually this is going to be increasing because if he can set a higher price, he's going to be willing to make more items available for sale. If they can't get very much for them, they're not going to be making very much, and they're not going to be willing to produce as many. The two curves will meet at what is called the equilibrium point, which is expressed by this notation. It's X sub E, P sub E. And basically to find it, all you do is you set the two equations equal to each other, solve for X. Once you find X, go back in, and remember that gives you the number of units. Put X into either one of the two equations, and that will give you the price. Now, we have this concept called utility, and utility refers to the value the consumer receives from the purchase of a product. For example, the number of movies you see in a month gives you a certain utility. You get an entertainment value out of that. Eating out at a restaurant, you get a value from that. You don't have to spend the time to make the food. You're not paying for the ingredients separately. It's being done for you, so you're getting a value of the food plus the time and the enjoyment. Paying the bill to heat your home. The utility you receive from paying that bill is you get a warm home in the winter. Graphically speaking, consumer surplus is the area between the demand function, which is what you're willing to pay, and the constant function of what you actually do pay. And it's a surplus because what you're willing to pay is actually more than what you're actually paying. And so what you're thinking of with consumer surplus, it's the idea of you're getting more for your money. Let's say you're willing to pay full price for a movie ticket at a regular theater, but you go to a dollar theater or a $1.50 theater, then you are getting a surplus because even though you're willing to pay full price at a regular theater, you're getting the movie for a whole lot less. So you're getting more for your money. And that's what we're talking about. This is kind of a visual description of it. You see the demand curve. That's what you're willing to pay. And then you see the horizontal line there, P. That's what you're actually paying. And that area in between, and Q is how much you're getting, like how many movies or how many of units are you buying. The area in between is your consumer surplus. And to find the consumer surplus, what you do is you need to find that brown area. So you take the area under the curve, under the D of X curve, and you subtract out that rectangle. Well, the area of a rectangle is just length times width. So the area of the blue rectangle is P times Q. So you're going to take the integral from 0 to Q of D of X, and then you're going to subtract Q times P, the quantity times the price. Let's try this. Find the consumer surplus for the demand function. Okay, pause the recording, give it a try, and resume to check your answer. All right, so when X is 3, the demand, put in 3 for the demand equation, you get 4. In other words, to buy 3 items, you're willing to pay $4 per item. So the consumer surplus, here's our formula, and these formulas, by the way, are on your formula sheet. Let's just fill everything in. We're going from 0 to 3. 3 is the quantity, it's the X. X minus 5 squared, there's our demand function, dx, minus 3 times 4. The 3 and the 4 are the x and the y value. We got the x value they gave us, the y value we got from putting the x into the demand function, so 3 times 4. And then just solve. On to the next slide. Here we're taking the integral and working it all out. The nice thing is most of the time that second one is going to be 0, but again, it's not always. If there's an e involved, it's not going to be 0, so be careful with that. And our final answer is $27. So your surplus is $27. Now try this one. Pause the recording, give it a try, and resume to check your answer. So you should have gotten $2.33. I know I kind of flipped quickly by that second slide. You can back it up if you need to go back and look at it, but it's the same formula we used a minute ago. So just double check, make sure you have it, and we'll move on. Now producer surplus, we had consumer surplus, now we have producer surplus. That's the extra money that producers receive by selling items at a market price that is higher than what they're willing to accept. So producers have like a minimum that they're willing to accept. When they can sell it for more than that, that's called the producer surplus. And you know, it's kind of roughly equal to their profit. Graphically speaking, it's the area between the constant function of the actual price and the producer's supply curve. And like I said, it's kind of like their profit. It's roughly equivalent to profit. Here's what it looks like, picturing it. P, the horizontal line at P there represents the price that they're actually selling it for. The curve S of X represents what they're willing to sell for. And so the green shaded area is going to be the surplus. It's what they're getting above and beyond what they expect to get. And in order to find this area, what we're going to do is we're going to take the area of the rectangle, which will be P times Q, and we're going to subtract that kind of tan colored area, which is the area under the supply curve. So this is very similar to our previous formula, except instead of doing the integral minus QP, it's going to be QP minus the integral. Again, this is on your formula sheet. Be very careful that you get which is which. It's a little confusing, at least it was for me. You've got to remember that the consumer surplus is represented by a D for demand, while the producer surplus is represented by an S. All right, let's try this. Find the producer surplus for S of X equals X squared plus X plus 3 when X is 3. Pause the recording, give it a try, and resume to check your answer. So we're going to put 3 in, and we get that when X is 3, the price is $15. So putting everything into our formula, we have 3 times 15 minus the integral from 0 to 3 of X squared plus X plus 3. And take the integral, double check your work, put in the numbers, and you should get $22.50. So they're getting $22.50 above what they would be willing to take. Like I said, it's kind of like their profit. Now try this one. Pause the recording, give it a try, and resume to check your answer. Okay, we get that when X is 1, our price is 5 2/3 or $5.67. But don't round it to that until the end of the problem. Putting everything into the formula should look like this. And continuing, take the antiderivative, take the integral, put the numbers in, and we get 8/9, and now you want to go ahead and convert it to a decimal and round it 89 cents. Now we also have something called the equilibrium point, and that is the point where the demand and the supply meet. That's where they intersect. And it's at that point where sellers and buyers come together, and it's kind of like the sweet spot. Everybody's making a surplus. Everybody's happy. The consumer's happy, the producer's happy. So and that's where the equilibrium is. To find it, all we have to do is set the supply and demand equations equal to each other and solve for x. And then put the x value into one of the two equations and solve for y. I actually mentioned this when we first talked about equilibrium. It's very simple, no calculus involved in that. Just set them equal to each other and solve. That gives you x. Go back and find y. The x value represents the number of items the consumer is willing to purchase or the supplier is willing to sell or produce for the price represented by the y value. At this point, there's going to be a consumer and a supplier surplus, so there's a benefit on both sides of the transaction. All right, now let's give this one a try. You're going to be doing the same thing we've been practicing, except before you do the two surpluses, you're going to find the equilibrium point. That's going to give you the x that you need for parts B and part C, and the P. It's going to give you the x and y point that you're going to need to use in B and C. So pause the recording, give this a try, and resume to check your answer. So the first thing we do is set the two equations equal to each other and solve, and you should have gotten that x is 2. Then you're going to want to take that and put it back into either supply or demand and find out what the price is. And we get $9. So our equilibrium point is 2 items for $9 per item. Now we're going to find the consumer surplus. So we're going from 0 to 2, the 2 we found. Take the integral of the supply function, the antiderivative, minus 2 times 9, minus the x times the y of the equilibrium point. And you should get 44/3, which is about $14.67. The producer, same song, second verse. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the surplus, producer surplus formula. So it's 2 times 9 minus the integral from 0 to 2 of the supply function. Take the antiderivative, put all the numbers in. You get 22/3, which is about $7.33. So both parties have a surplus. All right, try this one on your own. Pause the recording, give it a go, and resume to check your answer. Okay, so setting them equal to each other, we solve, and we actually get 2 answers. Now, they didn't work it all the way through. They did say that using the quadratic formula, you got 2 and 9. You could multiply everything by 3 and get 2x squared minus 7x plus 36 equals 0 and factor it. But in the end, you're going to get 2 and 9. Now, if you remember, the original problem said that x is less than or equal to 5. So we're going to throw the 9 out. We don't need to worry about that. So we're going to use 2 for x. And then we're going to find the p, the price, the y, by putting 2 back into either d of x or s of x. And they chose D and got 8. So the equilibrium point is 2 items at $8. Now find the consumer surplus, follow the formula, and you get $6.67. If you need to pause and look over the work, please do that now. Otherwise, we're going to continue. And then finally, the producer surplus, putting everything in the formula, we get $4.44. And again, if you need to kind of digest the formula a little bit, go ahead and pause the recording. If not, just keep playing and we'll continue on to the next slide. Okay, this is the section summary. Just might want to pause and look over this. This is what we did. Again, these major formulas are on your formula sheet, which is good news. You need to be sure that you have straight that the consumer surplus is the demand, the D function, while the producer surplus is represented by the letter S. That Q, think of Q as quantity, and P is price. Q is the X value, P is the Y value. The rest of this recording is some additional practice. So if you will pause the recording as you go through here, give them a try and resume to check your answer, and then just continue doing that until you reach the end of the recording.